Years ago, if you'd asked children what they wanted to be when they grew up, the average child would probably answer a doctor, a teacher, an astronaut. Maybe the more ambitious ones would say President of the United States. Today's children are giving very different answers. There's a 10-year-old boy in Australia who says he plans to get rid of pollution by inventing a new technology. He's already drawn up plans for a blueprint for a machine that uses water and electricity, and as he says, other stuff. There's a 13-year-old girl that plans to act as a bridge between people who don't get along. And she wants to help them build a better understanding and perception with less judgment. Another girl who's 13 says in the future, when things are all cleared up, pollution, corrupt people, the people are going to be left with a lot of heartache and trapped emotions, and they're not going to know what to do or what direction to take. She wants to be that person to give them direction and to help heal their trapped emotions. Finally, there's a girl in Germany. She knows she's an old soul, that this is her last incarnation on this planet, and although she doesn't know what her work is yet, she knows it's going to be big enough to make her last lifetime worthwhile. Now, how many kids do you know that are talking like this? I didn't get this off the internet or YouTube. It was pretty amazing to me, but these responses came from the youth in our Conscious Youth group. One night, I asked if any of them had any idea of what their mission or purpose was. Of the 12 on the call, 8 had very specific and detailed ideas. So, with that, welcome to everybody here online, to those who are going to be joining us in the future. So my intention today is to both inform and inspire you. Inform you about who these children are and how they are here to act as a catalyst for change in our world, and are truly the ambassadors for entering into this new fifth dimension. And inspire you as I tell my own story to look at your life with new eyes and recognize it as a perfect unfolding of the universe. As Ethan said, one of my roles is as the director of the Conscious Youth Program. We work with kids between 9 and 18 years old who are spiritually gifted and in various stages of their awareness of those gifts. I am the facilitator and mentor of our remote online group. We meet twice a month. It's a chance to be a social community for these kids, as well as to learn from some of the experts in the field as we bring in guest speakers. We also have the Weekend in Wizardry, which is a 3-day camp-like experience, which they get to actually use hands-on practices for their abilities and learn new abilities. We have a parent webcast that every couple of months we run, and it's a great place for parents to get support and talk about some of the challenges and the joys of raising a spiritually gifted child. In addition to my role with the Flower of Life, I have a private practice that I teach and counsel kids of all ages, and I also act as a consultant to parents and educators. The core of my work is to really assist crystal and hybrid children in not only recognizing who they are as multidimensional beings, but working with their frequencies to help bring into balance their emotional bodies. They incarnate as really high-dimensional beings, and they are dealing with the density that they find when they come into this third-dimensional body. Many of them express feelings of alienation, as if they don't belong here. Others know that this planet isn't home. They're also subject to downloads of information and energy all the time. And we know how hard it is for ourselves to integrate these energies, and we at least have some conscious awareness of ascension, perhaps we do. And for a child who doesn't have that corresponding conscious awareness, it can be really overwhelming. And parents, if anybody is a parent here, when your child's overwhelmed, you kind of just hope your energies are in balance that day. So, who are these conscious youth? The hybrids, the crystals, the rainbows. Why are they here? These are souls who have volunteered to come here, knowing full well the challenges that they face in this third-dimensional world, but they choose to come anyway. They come with a mission and a purpose, It's both for the collective as well as our individual soul's journey. So later in this talk, we'll address some of the gifts and the challenges, and also look at ways we, the adults in their life, can best serve them as we live out our own spiritual journeys. It's no accident that we're all here together at this specific time on the planet. And whether you're a parent or a grandparent, an aunt or an uncle, or maybe your role is as a doctor or educator or just a friend, just know that we play a crucial role in their lives right now. While they're here to teach us new ways of being and to help us in our own ascension process, they need us. They're relying on us to hold space, to hold that space for them so they can develop and flourish and grow into themselves as a multidimensional being. They need us, our high energies, our role modeling, our validation of them as spiritual beings, to offset the influences of the densities and the low vibrations that are pressing in on them at all the time. And we know how easy it is to forget and to deny our own innate abilities, to hide our true self, and in the end, become disconnected from our galactic families. Well, that's my story as well. You may be sitting there right now saying, yeah, that's what happened to me as a child. And that is what happened to myself. I am probably the perfect example of a disconnected soul's experience. At an early age, lacking a strong spiritual foundation, it really accentuated the struggles I had as a teenager. It's also, my life, an example of how we can get caught on this endless cycle of searching for the perfect guru or book or teacher to give us answers on why we feel so stuck. But my life is also the perfect example of how the universe gets us to where we're intended to be, no matter how many detours we take. I just turned 60 in October, and for the first time I'm feeling as if I'm actually on mission and on purpose. This work has just started, and rather than be regretful that I'm getting such a late start and not be sad about that, I try to look at it through the eyes of a woman named Louise Hay. And if you don't know who she is, she started Hay House Publishing at the age of 57. So according to my I want to add that she died when she was 93 and truly affected millions of lives in the process. So according to my calculations, I'm only in my third trimester. So who knows, I may be working with the kids in my Conscious Youth program. So before I get into my story, I'd like to offer you a spiritual challenge, a playful way to look at your own story and reflect on that. And truth be told, I'm stepping into my teacher self, and I'm going to give you some homework to do. So if somebody asked you to tell your story in under 2 hours, what would you include? What would you think is important enough, or what kind of life lessons would you like to share with somebody else? Well, I've had to do just that in preparing for this talk, and believe me, it wasn't easy. It's been uncomfortable to reflect and recall some experiences that I'd much rather not remember, but it's really helped me to connect and see patterns in my life that I wouldn't have seen otherwise. I've been able to look at the opportunity to really see the truth of how God, source, universal consciousness, whatever we want to call it, loves me so much, one seemingly insignificant little soul, is to put the specific people in my life at exactly the right time and to orchestrate the events in my life in a way that guided me back to discovering who I am and where I came from, and remembering that we're all one on this spiritual journey. So if you want to take me up on this challenge, feel free to come find me. I'll listen to your story as you're listening to mine. At home, I have a quote on my wall, and it's something that Michaela Sheldon said in one of her channels, and it stuck with me ever since. And it says, "We walk the human story we're meant to transmute in others." Just again, we walk the human story we're meant to transmute in others. So as I claim my calling and passion to work with this new wave of children, and part of that work involves the harmonization of their frequencies of their emotional bodies, is it any wonder then that the universe, my soul blueprint, my human story, involves exploring the depths of my own emotional body? Well, the universe didn't wait too long to give me those lessons. As early as in my mother's womb, I was begging God to let me come home. Now, we all know that we choose the family of origin that we have. We choose our parents. I happen to choose parents whose lives were already in emotional turmoil. My father lost his father at an early age. He was raised by his mother and grandmother, who unfortunately took out their frustrations on him very physically. My mom, later in her life, shared with me that she was molested by a neighbor when she was young. Well, the two of them met, married young in the Catholic Church, and unfortunately, their expectation for marital bliss was tarnished as early as the honeymoon when there was some domestic violence. I am the second of 4 children, all born about 18 months apart. My second sister, youngest one to me, her name's Jackie. Well, she was born with a congenital heart defect, what people would say is having a hole in their heart. And it's something I believe today that can be fixed within a couple days of birth. But this was 1961. Research was just underway. She had surgery. It was successful, but there were complications, and she died in recovery. She was 2.5, and I was just shy of my 4th birthday. So her dying so young, I didn't have many conscious memories of her except pictures and stories. But emotionally, there wasn't a day that went by that every cell in my body didn't mourn her absence. Suddenly, the love of my life was just torn away. Now, her death set me up with a childhood of really asking some pretty deep questions about life and death and God and why she got to leave and I had to stay. Now, parents do our best to explain these big concepts like death to children. All I knew, probably after them telling me that she fell asleep and God took her, or now that she's an angel up in heaven, but all I knew was that my baby was gone. Her death, like I said, really caused me to do some deep questioning and searching for answers, and it also accentuated the already bad relationship between my parents. My dad lost himself in work and alcohol. My mom, she was able to somehow compartmentalize her grief and really spent all of her energy focusing on the activities of ourselves. Growing up in such a volatile household, I lived in fear most of the time, had a lot of feelings of powerlessness and helplessness. Now, I don't for a minute think that was their intention. Parents just really weren't aware of the impact that they had on their kids. The collective consciousness 50 years ago was very different than what it is today. So as more of us are awakening, we're entering into a 5th dimensional paradigm of parenting. And it's one that asks us to fully embrace the idea that we don't own our kids, that we're here to co-create with them and to learn and teach each other. Now, we certainly need to help them navigate through this 3rd dimensional world. And we need to remember that while crystal children are multidimensional and they have wisdom of an old soul, they also came to this planet to learn how to be human. So they're going to be subjected to going through the same psychological and emotional stages of development as the other kids, as it requires of being human here. But their ways of knowing, they're extremely wise and smart in their ways of knowing, and they know that connection that they have with their higher self. They may not have the words to express it yet, but their inner guidance is getting them to where they need to be. So we, the adults in their life, have to pull back our desires to protect them from going astray and to feel as if it's our duty to teach them right and wrong. Now, you may be thinking, wait a minute, we have to raise moral human beings. What is she talking about? But if you think about it, we'd be teaching them our perception of right and wrong. We'd be passing down the same filters and thought patterns that we ourselves were raised with. And if we know anything about this new generation of children, their views of justice are much broader and more expansive. Now, we still have justice issues between people and genders and races, but they see how they interact with the environment and other species and even the climate as matters of justice. So my point is that it just might be a false premise that we need to teach them right from wrong. In my opinion, we need to trust their decisions and maybe even relax a little bit and allow them to make what we would consider bad choices. And indeed, those might be the time that we can best assist them. We can ask them things like, what was your heart telling you when you did this or that? How did your higher power communicate to you during that moment? And what reasons did you give yourself for doing this or that? It's times like that that we can actually bring their attention to their own inner knowingness. The other thing that's really important for parents to do, any adults interacting with kids, is to continue to do our own inner work. And we need to constantly check on ourselves and ask the question, am I role modeling an authentic life for my child? Am I listening to my own higher self in the same way that I want them to listen to theirs? Or are we perhaps sending some mixed messages? So this new paradigm also asks that we accept the knowledge that our children are coming in with their own soul blueprint. The very core, we're being asked to believe that the universe really is here to assist them. Now, each child comes in with their own karma, which means they may struggle in ways that just make no sense to us. And despite our best efforts, we can raise them with love and pure intentions, but it might be part of their own soul's blueprint to come in and magnetize and experience as much karmic density as possible at an early age in order to transmute it and do amazing things later on. So that quote that was on my wall, we walk the human story, we're meant to transmute in others, we have to know that it applies to our kids as well. That our role is as their companion walking on that human story. We can best serve them by exposing them to a life of spirituality, teaching them about their own inner compass, loving them unconditionally for sure, and being the keeper of their hope, because it's really possible and probably likely that somewhere along the way they're going to lose their hope. So we can hold on to it for them and keep it safe. There was a woman, a parent, who talked to me about this very topic recently, and she's feeling really good about what she's doing with her kids, helping them explore their inner passions, make their own decisions. That wasn't her problem. Her problem was the blowback that she's getting from other people. The looks and judgments of those families and friends and other parents that just don't feel that she's doing a good job in her parenting style, and that are accusing her of not giving their children enough guidance or direction. And it's an example of how we really do need to continue to do our own inner work and to stay in balance. Sadly, there's going to be people with this third dimensional perspective that are just never going to get it. They aren't going to understand what we're talking about here. So we can remind each other that we truly are here because we volunteered for this assignment. That may not be great news, but you did. Your soul contract puts you here to really be this pioneer. And we all know how tough the pioneers had it. So, to me, understanding how we accept a lot of karmic density early in our life helped me look at my own childhood with new eyes. When I got to high school, I was able to find a lot of refuge in academics and sports. And I was really good at both. So I was able to feel some confidence and competence, but also some recognition. I played every sport possible, but I really excelled at softball. And I was a dynamite pitcher. My sports claim to fame came when I was 15, when I was the youngest person on the women's major softball league in my city. So it's my time to give me a little shout out myself. I practiced every chance I could. And I didn't know it, but I was actually improving my skills through the process of visualization. Every night, to help me go to sleep at night, I'd picture myself pitching the perfect game. And I'd immerse myself in it in every aspect, with feeling the emotions as well. And I'd feel the ball, and I'd see it spinning in slow motion and drop behind the plate and strike out the best player in the league, which I did, by the way. But unbeknownst to me, what I was actually doing was engaging in a process of manifestation. And I was activating what brain researchers call mirror neurons. These are brain neurons that activate when we perform an activity or we see an activity performed. It's what allows us to learn by mimicking. Now, Dr. Joe Dispenza does really amazing work in this area, and he combines the sciences with spirituality. And he says that we could literally change our life through the power of our mind. That we have the ability to change our brain and our physical body through thought alone. He talks about how we have 3 brains, and we can go from knowing to doing to being. And if we focus our attention in a way that keeps us in the present moment, we can go from knowing to being and totally bypass that doing stage. There's a great, famous classic study. It's a Google piano study, and this comes up. It's so well known, that demonstrates this. And it's also a great example of neuroscience, which is when we make new pathways in the brain based on new experiences and novel learnings. Well, this study looked at the brains of people who were asked to play a sequence of notes on a piano for so many hours, so many days, and they compared it to the brains of people who were asked to play those same sequence of notes in their imagination. And they compared the 2 groups, and they found that the region of the brain that connected to their finger muscles changed to the same degree in both. So what that shows is our brain processes the imaginary as if it were real. Meaning our mind doesn't know the difference whether something's in our reality outside of ourselves or strictly in our mind. This kind of visualization practices take place today in everything from training athletes to helping stroke victims recover quicker. Dr. Joe, we're now friends. So Dr. Joe uses the various sciences to talk about spiritual concepts. And he looks at the old science, and what many of us grew up with is the science of cause and effect. And things have changed, science is shifting, and it's more accurate to say causing an effect. So as he looks at things like manifestation and the law of attraction, he's come up with a blueprint of sorts to follow. So if you're somebody who manifestation is new, or you're interested or wondering what people mean when you can create your own desired reality, he says, first we activate the creative part of our brain, which is the frontal lobe. And that can be done as easily as asking a question. What does blank look like? So what is it you want to manifest or create in your life? Let's say you want a new puppy. So what does my new dog look like? And then what we do is we get a picture in our mind and we set an intention. And our mind is creating that new experience. And the third step is connected to an emotion. What emotion is going to connect you to living in the future as if that has already manifested itself? So our mind is creating the experience, and our body is already having a taste of the future. So he also recommends recording these images to keep it in our conscious mind, but also record the negative that comes up, because certainly there's going to be the little voice that challenges any kind of change that we're going to make. And by recording those, it gets it out of the subconscious mind as well, so it doesn't set you up to sabotage. And then he says, look for the synchronicities in your life. This is the universe's way of saying you're on the right path. Now just imagine if we can teach this to our kids at an early age and to show them that they actually have some power over their own life and see the connections between the thoughts and the feelings and the reality. Now, if I would have had this information when I was a kid, I would like to believe it would have changed some things. By the time I was 15, I was pretty much in a full-blown clinical depression. Now, it was never diagnosed as such because I put a lot of energy into putting up a good front. So I pretty much was going through it alone. I didn't have the support of family or friends. Now, no fault of their own, because I never put out any of the typical red flags. I had good grades, I was active in sports, I had plenty of friends, enough to where I didn't look like I was isolated. But where are my spiritual supports in this? I was raised Catholic, went to church every Sunday, went to Catholic school, but between the church's sin model of religion and my own experiences with my dad, my image of God was of this mean, vindictive old man up on a cloud somewhere looking down, ready to condemn and judge me. And as for Jesus, well, my perception as a kid was that if Jesus was God, he could have gotten down off that cross anytime he wanted to. Now, I remember sitting in the pews at church and listening to the Gospels and the priest going on and on about how he suffered and died for us. And honestly, it was horrible, but I just couldn't feel sorry for Jesus. I did feel guilty about that. But in my mind, he had choices, and I didn't. I was stuck in hell, and nobody was coming to save me. So I obviously never grew up with a lot of strong spiritual foundations in my life. I didn't have a personal, loving relationship with a higher power or nature, which is pretty much the definition of spirituality. And that lack really did accentuate some of the struggles that I had as a teenager. Dr. Lisa Miller is a clinical psychologist and a researcher, and says that a strong spirituality is essential to a child's ongoing and physical mental health. Now, she started the Spirituality Mind-Body Institute and teaches at Columbia. She wrote a book, The Spiritual Child, The New Science of Parenting for Health and Lifelong Thriving. I can never remember the title of that book. I can't recommend this book enough. If you have children of any age, or if you're just interested in sorting out your own life. The first part of this book, she talks about how to build that strong foundation in a younger child. The second half, which is intriguing to me, is that she looks at the teenager, and a teenager is going to embark on their own spiritual quest. It's just part of the growing mind and development of who they are as they individuate. She stresses the point that because they're on this quest and they're going to start asking these bigger questions about who's God and where do I fit in this universe, that they're going to pass through a stage of developmental depression that is going to be natural. So as a parent, if you see this in your child, her point, what I like to really stress as well, is don't get scared by that. Allow them to go searching for the answers. We know that when we ask these questions, they don't come fast. And these kids don't want our answers. For as much as it's going to throw them into this void of darkness and disconnect, it's still important that those answers are their own. So it's truly, like I said, it's a tremendous insight, and there's also lots of examples in there of various examples of life circumstances. Part of the research that she did looks at a child's positive and active relationship to spirituality. And when they have it by 10 years old, they're 40% less likely to abuse drugs, 60% less likely to fall into a deeper depression as a teenager, and 80% less likely to engage in unprotected sex. Now, she's one of the first people in the 90s to really use a methodology to look at spirituality in children. The other thing she found was that we have an innate capacity for spirituality. Just like we have a capacity for learning how to read or write or think, it needs to be nurtured and developed, however. So she says that children need spiritual parenting. And what she found was that an unconditional, loving, and reliable parent was directly associated to their experience of an always present, accepting, and loving God. And that spiritual foundation that she talks about can be strengthened even further if there's a shared bond of spirituality between a parent and a child, specifically between a mother and a child. Now, this spiritual foundation is not reliant on any kind of religious affiliation or even the belief system of the parent. So if you're thinking you're a parent that is really just starting out on this spiritual journey and I don't have the knowledge to teach my child about God, she says rely on that child's innate capacity to be the catalyst for your learning and theirs and to grow together in that understanding. And if you have a child that is older and perhaps didn't get that framework or that foundation, not to worry. Our spirituality is about 1/4 of an inch below the surface of our skin. And what she means by that is with a little exposure and experience, this can be activated in no time. In her book, she gives some ways to nurture this spiritual growth, and I've included just a couple. She says, speak it. Give these kids a language, a vocabulary that can connect to their own experience. Talk about things like head knowing and heart knowing, synchronicities, inner compass. Share your authentic self and your own experiences and show to them that there's a value in the spiritual life based on your own actions. Teach them spiritual practices, as simple as keeping your door open when you meditate. Now that might be kind of weird in your house with 10 kids, but at least you're showing them that this is important to you. Or around the dinner table, develop a ritual of gratitude. Or what I found really amazing, these kids love to use their abilities and their gifts to help other people. What I'm thinking is, if you found somebody in your life that is struggling, making it a ritual to bring someone to mind every day and spend 2 minutes of just sending healing energy. You're going to find these kids just blossom with the value that they feel, and it's going to be really effective because these kids are really powerful. And then finally, find ways to nurture the spirituality, and that might be a simple walk in nature. Or walking from your house to the garage, there's your favorite tree. Well, have them listen to the tree or talk to the animals. They're really good at both. So as Dr. Miller talks about spiritual children, you might want to ask, is there a difference between raising a spiritual child and an awakened child? Well, the qualities that she talks about certainly apply to both. So we need to look at the individual child to really answer this question. In my 20s, I considered myself spiritual. Now, I had a personal relationship with a higher power, but I never considered myself awake. And it really takes a shift in consciousness or vibration to be awake. An awakened child certainly is a spiritual child, but a spiritual child isn't necessarily awake. And just like my 20s, we probably all know adults that are very spiritual, but they still live in that third dimensional perspective. The same is going to apply to a child. Now, throughout humanity, we've always been connected to a higher power or nature. Even ascended masters have inserted themselves in our linear timelines in order to anchor in a higher vibrational consciousness. But it hasn't been until the Earth really moved into this fourth dimension that humanity has shifted as well. This new Earth grid has opened up our ability to connect multigalactically. Humanity is no longer stuck in this repeated cycle of forgetting every time we come back for another lifetime. As children are coming in the last 50 or 60 years, they're maintaining these memories of sources. And they're recognizing that they're multidimensional beings. And these are the awakened children. Awakened children aren't limited to their 5 senses. So you may have a little one or a big one walking around and talking about seeing spirits. Or they may respond telepathically to your unspoken thoughts. They're also highly empathic. They pick up and absorb the energies from those around them and from the environment that they're in. It's possible that you may wake up one day wondering if you're getting the flu, and your healthy little child an hour ago comes and now says she has a bellyache too. Or it explains why your child has a meltdown every time they go to Walmart. They're reacting to the energies of the crowd or the Wi-Fi or the fluorescent bulbs. So the earlier we can teach them to really discern what's their energy and what's somebody else's, it's a great service to them. And we can do things in our own home to eliminate some of the toxic frequencies. Turn your Wi-Fi off if you're not using it. That would be a real novel idea to myself, wouldn't it? Or don't sleep with your phone next to your bed. But there are kids that literally are having meltdowns or severe headaches because of the Wi-Fis or the electronics. They also express feelings of being different. And sometimes it takes programs like Conscious Youth to help these kids validate that there's others in the world just like them. Or if you're a parent and you can hook them up with other gifted kids, they really need that to not feel so alone. And in that sense of not feeling like other people, we had a teacher come on as a guest speaker in our Conscious Youth group back in the spring. Her name's Mary Rodwell, and she is an expert in the field of extraterrestrials. That was our topic for the night. And as part of the preparation, any child that wanted to, they filled out this online questionnaire, which you can too. Her website is alienlady.com. And it's a questionnaire that has about 70 statements, and you rank them from strongly agree to strongly disagree. And these are some of the characteristics that she found in ET experiencers in working with them. So I took some of their responses, and the ones that are 80% or more that identified it as strongly agree, and these are some of their responses. I feel I have a mission or purpose. I feel I can communicate with animals or rocks or plants or minerals. I feel I visit other planets or places with my consciousness. I have energy surges in my bodies at times. Now, this can be unusual to some people. Maybe it's common and it's not like startling information. For that, I got answers from a 9 and a 10-year-old that took me aback a little bit. They answered strongly agree to the following. Imagine being their parents. I have missing or extra time episodes. I feel as if someone's always observing me. I have marks or scars on my body that I can't explain. I feel as though I have unusual small objects implanted in my body. These are 9 and a 10-year-old. Now, that's not to say that all of these kids have been contacted by ETs and spaceships. Multidimensional contact can come in many forms, from angelic beings to fairies to spirit guides. Nor does this mean that these kids need psychological help. It's really, actually understandably so, that somebody from a third dimensional perspective can look at these responses and have a heartfelt concern for their mental health. That's a perspective that these parents have to deal with in raising these kids. So I go back to the question, is there a difference in raising a spiritual child and an awakened child? And I'm just going to say, you be the judge of that. I graduated from high school. I went to a all-girls, women's Catholic college, and really saw other people's spirituality for the first time. And I saw people who actually had meaning and purpose in their life, something I always longed for. I joined one of the spiritual life groups on campus and experienced Catholicism very differently for the first time. And I was really impressed and kind of curious about the lifestyle of this committed nun. All the nuns, we lived on a campus that had the community house on campus. By my senior year, a friend of mine and I actually wondered if we were being called to the religious life. So we literally went and had an interview with the major superior, and this lovely, wise woman advised us to go out and experience the world first, and honey, if you think you're still called, come back, we'd be happy to have you. So my friend and I made this agreement that if by the age of 29 we're still thinking about this, then we'd look into it further. So while I never ended up becoming a nun at the end of college, I do credit those years for turning me into a real clown. And I don't mean my great sense of humor. I mean, literally, a real clown. White face paint, funky outfits, wig. And what I found was this was a real calling. It was in the anonymity and being hidden that I could really experience my true spirit. And it was so much so that after college, I continued clowning and I developed my own character, which Ethan still has a hard time believing, but my character was named Speechless the Clown. And yes, the minute that paint went on, I stopped talking. Now, the universe used one of my clowning experiences to really foreshadow some of my future mission. I was asked to participate in a fundraiser for families with children of cerebral palsy. And I'd never worked with special needs children before, so it was all really instinct and intuition. Well, on this given day, there was a 4-year-old little boy named Jason that absolutely changed my life. Now, this child was deathly afraid of clowns. Don't know why he was there, but he was afraid of clowns. I do know why he was there, and I'll tell you that in a minute. So I knew where he was just by his shrieks of panic throughout the day. I did my best to stay out of his line of sight, and when I ran into him, I did something rather unique. And when he screamed and hid behind his mom, I mimicked his actions and his feelings. And I got scared, and I found something to hide behind. And as I encountered him in that way several times during the day, what I noticed is his glances got a little bit longer, and he wasn't screaming anymore. He was still hiding, but he wasn't screaming. And what I was doing was really allowing him the space to feel his feelings without judgment or limitations. And as I became a curiosity to him, things started to shift a little bit. Now, from our own spiritual journeys, we know that if we can start in that place of resistance and move to a more neutral place, perhaps curiosity, that we open the door for possibility and potential. And what happened when his courage started to grow, like I said, there was a shift. And by the end of the day, our last encounter, he didn't hide behind his mom. He just stood there and he stared back. So I got down and got little and still looked a little timid. And I used to give out these stickers to the kids. So I stood there with a sticker in my hand. And he took a couple steps forward, supported by his mom. She and I looked at each other, and it's like, something big is about to happen here. So he came and he grabbed this sticker. And I thought I'd go a little further, and I opened my arms up to give him a hug. He walked right up, gave me the biggest hug that I can imagine. And it was 30 years ago, and it still gives me chills. He's probably about 34 right now. So what that story demonstrates is really how miracles can happen when we validate and honor where people are in that moment. And when I reflected on this, it gave me a new understanding of the phrase holding space. So when we create that intention, that energetic space, kind of like a bubble, that is really free from judgment and expectation and certainly our agendas, it's the place where potential exists and where change and miracles can happen. I never set out to fix Jason or cure his fear of clowns. I just wanted to connect with him. So by being that mirror to him and being a mirror to his fear, I got to see firsthand what it looks like when we release fear and we replace it with trust and joy. Now, shifts like that probably don't occur that fast as they did in his case. But if we keep at it over time, something will happen. And I try to approach my work in this same way with the conscious youth in my own private practice. And I set the intention to meet them where they're at in that moment and to honor who they are and be that mirror for love, which is in essence who they really are. While Jason wasn't autistic, I was inspired to react to him in the way I did after reading a book called Sunrise, A Miracle of Love. Now, this was back in the late 70s, and they actually made a made-for-TV movie. I'm really dating myself there. They don't even call that anymore. Barb is laughing. And the book itself, it's a story of a family's journey through autism. The parents were told by the medical community that there's no hope for this child and they ought to just institutionalize him. Well, they refused to do that, and they worked with him year after year and really developed their own therapy program with this young man. They set the intention to simply be present to him. And they realized that he's in a world unto himself, but rather than try to pull him out of his world and into theirs, they decided to do their best to enter his. So they sat with him day after day, mimicking his actions. They played as he played, and they gestured as he gestured, and eventually they started guiding his actions, and he started mimicking them. And it truly turned out to be a groundbreaking therapy at that time, and it's still used in many of the schools today for these children. Last year I had a chance to spend a couple months teaching in one of our specialized schools for autism. Now, how I got there was totally orchestrated by the universe. It was not my choice, nor did I necessarily even was qualified for it. Don't tell the school that. I have a master's degree in education, and I'm an intervention specialist for mild to moderate disabilities, and have been since 2002. But this population was new to me. So I get my assignment for the school year. I totally panicked. I'm just about on the phone with HR to plead my case on why this was such a bad idea. And then I realized that I asked for this. 2 months earlier, I put out to the universe, help me integrate the two worlds that seem so different for me. And those two worlds were my mainstream job, which was teaching emotionally and behaviorally challenged youth, and what I came to understand as my spiritual work, which was with conscious youth and work with the Lightworker program. And how is it that I see this as an integration? Well, the year prior or so, I started hearing spiritual teachers talk about how this increasing prevalence in autism is really a connection to the spiritual and physical evolution on the planet. That became a curiosity to me, and it allowed me to wake up every morning and not dread my job. I actually look forward to going and staying open to the possibility that these are multidimensional children, perhaps getting downloads, and perhaps some of their gesturing is an overload of energy. And so, it allowed me to approach what I was doing differently. If you yourself have a child with autism, you know the physical demands. As we talk about the spiritual aspect of this, having the luxury to even be spiritual reflective on some days would just truly be a luxury. So I want to say, anybody out there with a child or an adult with autism, there's no way in the world I intend to minimize in any way the emotional and physical demands that you go through on a 24-hour basis. And I got a little bit of a taste for that just working in a school with 3 other adults in a classroom, having 10 kids and just getting them to breakfast and hygiene. I was exhausted by 10 o'clock in the morning. Also, if you're going to hear what I'm about to say for the first time, expect your left brain to offer you a little resistance. Mine did. I kind of came up with this method for myself that I call the what-if method. When I'm exposed to different spiritual ideas, they're just a little bit beyond my comfort level or still seem a little too woo-woo to me. I don't want to shut it off altogether, but I also want to be discerning. So asking what if allows me to provoke my imagination, but keep that healthy skepticism. So I'm going to give you a couple of what ifs in this regards. What if souls are coming to this planet with a blueprint that includes autism? What if souls are coming to this planet with such a high vibration that when they get in their physical bodies, they have such heightened sensitivities to touch and to sound and to smell? What if these multidimensional beings are coming so advanced and evolved that they have telepathic abilities? What if these multidimensional beings are coming in larger and larger numbers to get us, humanity, to stop and take notice of them? To just ask, why are they even here? And to really look at some of the bigger questions, like the toxins in our environment or how we overstimulate ourselves day after day. What if these souls are coming to simply wake us up? Now, if they got here, how would we even recognize them? And if we think about all those what ifs, certainly if they got here, they would struggle with the environment, perhaps even shut it out altogether in order to just survive. If they have telepathic abilities, they don't need to verbalize with us, so they would look like they'd have delayed language development. And they'd probably stand out socially because of this isolation and physical sensitivities. And we as a society, who need to label and categorize everything, would most likely give them the label of autistic, or at least put them on the spectrum somewhere. So perhaps the bigger what if is really meant for us. What if we're being asked to change our perspective and our perception of who these kids are? If they are coming in, already communicating with us, is it perhaps a nudge for us to look into developing our own telepathic abilities? At least requiring or asking us to be more mindful of our own thoughts when we're around them. If they know what we're thinking, are we sending messages that perhaps we think there's something wrong with them? So if we allow them to be our teachers and to really be a catalyst for our spiritual advancement, just imagine how different society can be. Now, am I saying that I think all autistic children are telepathic or here to raise the consciousness of the planet? Probably not. No more than saying every child has the same spiritual mission or experience. But we do know that simply coming to the planet and being that presence of light and love is raising its consciousness. We can't really talk about the topic of autism without touching on the emotionally explosive topic of vaccines. Now, talking about vaccines is kind of like talking about American politics today. You've got a group that is pro-vaccine, anti-vaccine, and everybody seems really entrenched in their beliefs. It's so personal and emotional that you can't really find a place to have healthy dialogue about it. But it's becoming a global issue. And it's not a surprise because as global consciousness is shifting, darkness is being exposed in all aspects of our society. Light is infiltrating our governments and our medical fields, our education, the banking, certainly big pharmaceutical companies. And we know, we can feel confident that the light's getting stronger because the pushback is getting more severe. Right now, there is 6 states that I'm aware of that have made vaccines mandatory in order to attend public schools or charter schools. There's also a number of states that are currently voting to remove the exemptions that exist for religious or philosophical beliefs. And although it seems like we're walking into this darker time when parental rights are being stripped, more evidence is coming out that shows that there's a link between vaccines and childhood injuries. Now, evidence that nobody wants made public. Can we reframe this, and rather than falling into that trap of fear, which is really what is being demonstrated around us, that darkness, can we reframe this and really look at, just like the children with autism, can vaccines be a way to move us forward spiritually? the mandatory vaccines are already moving parents to take their kids out of these failing school systems. Will this be a wake-up to the educational system when all these people start leaving? So indirectly, is vaccines going to shed some light on other areas that also need to collapse in order to move forward? As I was doing some more research on this, I found that it was kind of like jumping down the rabbit hole for me. It just kept getting darker and darker and more complex. And I found that if I wasn't in balance on a given day, that the evidence on both sides, I'd be over here saying, yeah, that seems right. And then I was on the other side going, but that seems right. And it was actually maddening a few times. So I'm here, my intention today is just present a few facts and a few resources. And as we all are posed with looking at these questions for ourselves, it might be useful. It won't be a surprise to hear that big pharmaceutical companies with their money and power control most of the decision making in government and mental health, certainly in the media. The government in 1986, Congress passed the National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act. It exempts any pharmaceutical company or distributor, manufacturer, or even health professionals from any liability that's caused by a vaccine. It's just crazy. Now, proponents are saying that there's no scientific evidence that will say that there's a definite link and you can't prove it. Well, families can bring lawsuits against the government, not the pharmaceuticals, but they can bring it against the government. So far, there's at least 85 cases of where the government paid out financial compensation to families who used science to say that there was a direct link to the vaccine and the injury of their child. And this is how boring my life is, I guess, but I was watching C-SPAN the other day, and there was a hearing on flu vaccines. It was perfect timing for this talk, so I actually sat there and I watched it. There was only one congressman who stood up to the people who were saying that these are safe. And the information he provided, he said that you might want to reconsider what you're saying or at least make it known to the public. But the Vaccine Injury Trust Fund, which is this governmental fund, has paid out close to $4 billion since 1986. Given that, I also was online and I found a site, vaccineimpact.com. To the best of my knowledge, there's no hidden agenda or financial backing of any kind. I believe truly that this is a place that is putting out resources and facts. And on that site, I found an article, U.S. media blackout, Italian courts rule vaccines cause autism. Now, there's other court rulings, which are pretty official, around the world, from Japan, Denmark, Sweden, that have found similar results. But American media certainly isn't going to cover it. There's a couple of documentaries out, Trace Amounts and Vaxxed, that explore some of the toxic chemicals that are found in vaccines, like thimerosal and mercury and aluminum. I heard a story. Now, I don't know the source, so I get kind of leery about passing things on, but the person who told me is pretty credible. She said that a vial of vaccines dropped and spilled on the floor, and before they can clean it up, they had to treat it as hazardous waste. They literally had to wear protective clothing. And this is what we're being told is safe enough to inject into our child. Now, on the other side of the argument, just to be fair, there's an episode of Frontline on PBS called The Vaccine War. And this was one of those that I watched, and by the time that hour was over, I started questioning everything I thought I believed, because they cite credible sounding research to say that there is no link between autism and vaccines, or childhood injury and vaccines. And it's all disinformation being disseminated. All of this, despite all this evidence, it's indisputable the stories that parents tell. The parents are talking about their once healthy child vibrant, energetic, expressive, who suddenly regress or have a permanent disability within hours or days of getting a vaccine. While we look at this and this battle of who's right and who's wrong goes on, what do we do in the meantime? Well, it's really an individual choice that each person or adult, if we're talking about flu vaccines, has to make for themselves. The best we can do is really acknowledge that informed consent is the key. So we can do our research, although finding credible evidence and discerning that is pretty tough. And the other thing we can do is really work to maintain our power when we're working with health professionals. We have every right to question or challenge their authority and ask the questions that perhaps make them a little uncomfortable that we're asking. In their defense, I do want to say that they have to present the standard of care, regardless of their own personal beliefs. Because if they don't, they're subject to sanctions from the medical board themselves. So as we get frustrated with our doctors, there's a flip side to that story as well. In my efforts to give some more information, there's something called the Vaccine Information Sheet, the VIS. The government is mandated to give you this piece of paper. It acts sort of as a consent for the vaccination. Now, the caveat in this is all they have to do is hand you that piece of paper, and they've done their duty. It doesn't matter if it's 2 minutes before they're about to give the injection. Not many people are going to say, hey, doctor, can you wait 5 minutes? Because doctors don't have 10 minutes. Nobody's going to take the time to read that. So my suggestion is to ask for this sheet prior to your appointment. Take the time to look it over, see what ingredients are in this vaccine and why it's being given. And then ask yourself, are there less toxic ways, perhaps, that I can protect my child? Or is it appropriate to give at this point in their life? Is there a benefit to waiting? And the one that is really surprising to me, do I really need to have 3 or 4 or 5 vaccines given on one day just because it's more efficient and we don't have to bring our child back or they don't have to set another appointment for us? So those are the kind of questions that we can really ask. And as I look at vaccines, I'm not a parent myself, and I often wonder if I even have a right to take a stance on this issue. And I say that because if I'm holding a baby in my arms, is my opinion going to change? On the one hand, am I really that crazy to think that I'm going to inject toxic chemicals into my little adorable child here? But on the other, can I live with myself if this child dies? And I know I could have possibly given him a vaccine to prevent that. So honestly, I don't know what my answer would be, and I'm kind of glad I am 60 years old. Now, my niece and nephew in the next few years might have to deal with that, and I can support them in any way I can. So it comes down to this. We can be informed, do our own research, use the best intuitive common sense that we have, and when it comes time, we make the best decision that we can in that moment. And the critical key for me is we need to release the outcome. So we make that decision, whether it's to give the vaccine or not to give the vaccine. And if we give it, we need to release the fact that that nagging little voice that can be there for months or for years. Should I have done this? What if my child gets sick? What if they don't? And it's that space of fear and doubt that might set up and manifest that very thing that we don't want. So once you make that decision, trust that the universe has your best interest in heart, and same for your child. Back to my story. When I graduated from college, I had a degree in math. I got a job as a systems analyst for a phone company. It was very successful. Bought a condo by the time I was 26, drove this cool little sports car. Any inkling I had about religious life faded not too long after that, severed ties with the Catholic Church, and I was on my way. Well, my 20s was a time of spiritual awakening and growth. And this was back in the 80s when the New Age movement was well underway. And I don't know if anybody, back to Barb, thank goodness you're here, Barb. Anybody knows that to ascribe to anything New Age would really have people thinking you were weird. And I don't mean the cool kind of weird that my nephew used to call me. I loved it. But the taboo, strange kind of weird. Like if you admitted to reading Shirley MacLaine's book, Out on a Limb, and you even hinted that she was God. Her claim was that I'm God. Well, this was before this really caught on mainstream. Or if you entertain the idea that J.Z. Knight was channeling this extraterrestrial named Ramtha. Look up Ramtha on YouTube. It's really fascinating. Everybody here is so young. So either I was just hanging out with the wrong crowd or I was being judged in a way that I shouldn't have. I'm not sure. But I ended up meeting up with a psychic astrologer, and I took some astrology classes from her, and she introduced me to the Course in Miracles. I ended up taking a few seminars. One that was the most amazing to me taught the Silva mind control method. And it's in that I learned how to meditate. 20 years of Catholic school. I wasn't sure what prayer was. I found out what prayer was through the seminar. Learned about the power of the mind and really experienced my own psychic abilities for the first time. And it was through my 20s that I continued to learn and grow and have my belief systems challenged and stretched in ways of really validating my own inner knowing. One of the things I resonated with was this crazy anti-Catholic notion of reincarnation and past lives. And I'm really glad I did, because through my 20s, my depression was still pretty intense. And on some days, I could barely get through it just to survive the day. And it was my opening up to this whole idea of reincarnation that got me through some really tough times, because there was no way in the world I wanted to come back and do this again. So I credit that to helping me out a little bit. I also used my sense of humor to kind of keep family and friends at bay, not give them any reason to really think I was anything but happy. So at family gatherings, I would tell stories like, when I was 25, I jumped out of an airplane, or that I took a fire eating class. If I was at a party and things got slow, I'd pick up 3 items and start juggling. And I'm also a pretty good storyteller, so I can get a laugh when I want one. I can take a story and bring it up to that dramatic pause right before you have that unexpected ending. Kind of like this. Do you remember your first kiss? Where you were, who you were with? My first kiss came when I was 10 years old. And it was a messy tongue kiss. It wasn't even alone. I was in front of 200 people. And what I remember most was just how bad his breath smelled. Now, this wasn't from a drunk uncle at a wedding. My first kiss was from a killer whale named Shamu at SeaWorld. Somebody knows SeaWorld. So I relished in the celebrity status that came with that in my family that day, but I also spent the rest of the day pretty much alone because my clothes smelled so bad of fish odor. So, in addition to my 20s being a time of spiritual awakening, I also invested a lot in my own inner work. I hooked up with a counselor. She immediately recognized my depression and put me on antidepressants. We looked at family issues and issues about my sister's death, and we also looked at some of my spiritual beliefs. And fortunately, I was able to separate God from the Catholic Church. And what I mean by that is that vindictive, mean old God, I was able to actually leave him with the church. I didn't resolve a whole lot of church issues, but I was able to create a image of God that was loving and had my best interests at heart. How I did that, it's really funny, the mind games I had to play to break this patterning. I literally had to stop using the word God for years and years and years because it had too much emotional baggage connected with it. Unfortunately, the metaphysical was something that I was in, so God became universal consciousness, which lacked some of the personal, but if the personal was negative, I was willing to give that up. I ended up hooking up with a 12-step program for Overeaters Anonymous and really took to the 12-step spirituality. And that's of living in this state of surrender and allowance and allowing your higher power to really guide you in every aspect of your life. And it was through one of these meetings that I met a woman who I had immediately recognized, even though I never knew her in this lifetime. And that was maybe happened twice in my life. I don't know if you've ever had that experience where you know that you know this person, and it's really startling, actually, when it happens. And if you're familiar with 12-step spirituality at all, there's references to higher power everywhere. Well, I hooked up with her. She became my sponsor. Her higher power was Jesus. Now, that made me a little uncomfortable because while I resolved my issue with God, I really hadn't addressed my baggage with Jesus. But I wanted to honor her space, so I let her talk and use that name, and I just, in my head, switched it to a more neutral term like higher power, and we communicated. But I was really curious. This Jesus she talked about like it was a real person and a friend of hers. And so like anything at that time, when my curiosity met my skeptical mind, I kind of kept things playful. And I found ways to play with it. So I still use this today if I want to connect with a being or a collective that I'm not familiar with. And I call it my Dear HP pen pal journaling. Now, I wanted to really look into this Jesus relationship she had. So I asked myself, how would I go about getting to know a friend of a friend that I don't know? And what if that friend lived far away, like California? I'd become a pen pal. So I became Jesus's pen pal. I know that sounds weird, but like I said, we're going playful here. So every night before I went to bed, I made sure that I would journal. And I kept it about the size of a postcard. It was only like 2 or 3 sentences. And since Jesus was still a higher power to me, that's where I came up with the Dear HP, higher power. And these entries kind of went like this. Dear HP, I hear you're a friend of Rosette's and your name is Jesus. I hope you don't mind, but I'm going to call you HP for now. Maybe we can meet up one day. Dear HP, had a really tough day at work today. People were so annoying. What kind of work do you do? Maybe you can give me some advice. I'm not kidding. This was for real. And as this went on, the entries got a little bit more personal. Dear HP, I've been crying all day and I don't know why. I hope my depression's not coming back. I wish you were here. I could really use a hug. So over the course of a couple of weeks, my 2 or 3 sentences at most turned into a paragraph. And I just was very religious in doing this. Oh, pun intended, not intended. Very religious doing this. Wow. On the 17th day, an absolute miracle happened. Jesus became real to me. And it was in this stance of curiosity and openness, being open to possibility, that the universe responded in a way that allowed this connection that I so desired. So I'm driving around in my cool little sports car, have my sunroof open, just minding my own business. And I was aware of a presence in the passenger seats. So I look over and of course, nothing there. But nonetheless, there was this visceral presence. And in a minute, in a second, I knew it was Jesus. So for the next 7 or 8 years, I felt like I was never alone. And I'd have conversations in my head, and meditations would be very vivid. And Looking back, which is why I think you should do your homework so you can make some connections. Looking back, I didn't realize that I was clairvoyant or clairaudient. I had no idea that that was a term, but apparently I was. As I explored this relationship with Jesus Ascended Master, I realized I was doing it through a filter very much in conflict with the Catholic Church as Jesus, the only Son of God. And I became very protective of who I would tell. It was exciting news, but I didn't want this misconstrued as like a religious born-again experience. And not that I have anything against that, or I'm really not anti-religion, which you may start wondering. If religion can bring us to that personal relationship that's loving with a transcendent, then absolutely, it serves a purpose. That wasn't my experience, and I didn't want this awakening to be limited in any way. And fortunately, I didn't really feel this conflict. I knew intellectually that this was a conflict, but I didn't feel it because I pretty much severed my ties with the Catholic Church. But the universe is pretty funny. If we're meant to deal with issues, it's going to orchestrate our life in a way that's going to come around back again. And perhaps even give us opportunities that puts us in a direction that we never saw coming. So as I'm living this lifestyle of being in the moment and surrendering, and synchronicities were everywhere, I used to describe my life as if I'm living it on a path that's about 18 inches. And I can't see anything beyond those 18 inches, but I know those are guided, and I trusted those immensely. Well, one day I'm walking up to a counter at CVS, and I look, and there's a Catholic newspaper that I used to sell as a kid in the magazine section. So I bought it, and I'm looking through it, and I see this ad for a retreat for women interested in reflection and self-exploration, and I thought, this is perfect. And then I saw the fine print at the bottom. It said, for women interested in vocations, which means for women interested in becoming a nun. Well, I literally turned the page on that. But like I said, the universe is pretty darn funny. I turned the page on that. Well, it didn't. I come to find out that that newspaper isn't even sold in retail stores. And then I laughingly tell my friend about this the week later, and she didn't laugh. Instead, she says, oh, I heard about that, and my daughter went to it 2 years earlier. So here I am living this 18-inch path, having synchronicities, and I knew that something's going on here. After all, that newspaper shouldn't even have been there. So 3 weeks later, I packed my suitcase, and I spent the weekend with 40 other women and 15 nuns. And that first night of mingling, one woman stood out, and she was casually dressed, in her late 30s, attractive, had a good sense of humor. She laughed at my jokes. She turned out to be a nun. She was one of the women running the program. And then it hit me like a ton of bricks. If somebody like her, so normal, could be a nun, then holy crap, maybe why am I here? So I ended up in that time recalling the words that my friend and I spoke 10 years earlier in college. And we said that if by the time we're 29, we're still interested in joining a community, we'd look into it. This weekend was in November. I just turned 29 the month before. So I couldn't deny the coincidences. Had to follow my curiosity, so I started looking into religious communities and what it would mean and how you would find one, and kept meeting more and more people that kept reinforcing what was happening, so I kept at it. But I knew this had to be a fluke, that somewhere along the line, my path was going to veer off into a different direction. But it never did. You should have seen the look on my mother's face a year and a half later when I told her I was entering the convent. She really didn't know if I was playing another joke on her or not. So at age 32, I sell my condo. I leave my $50,000 a year job. I give my little sports car to my mother. And the hardest thing about all that is I had to find a new home for my 8-year-old cat. And I ended up becoming the youngest member of a community of women of 450. Now, the kicker of all of this is that my feelings about the church never really changed. I didn't enter this Catholic religious community to be a role model of the church. I don't know what I was thinking, but it was the vibrant energy of this community of women that attracted me. And it was their ministry and their service and their committed lifestyle that really grabbed my soul. The fact that it was within the shadow of the Catholic Church is something I really struggled with for the next 10 years. So I ended up being in the formation process and along each step of the way. Now, I let them know my 18-inch little guidance system, and I told them, this is what I know now, and this is as far as I can go. Each time there was another decision in the process, I'd check in. If it's about right, I move forward. Well, I spent 6 years in temporary vows doing that. And it wasn't until my 9th year in the community, which is the year for discerning final commitment, that my inner compass started going haywire. And I could no longer stay in this place of denial and the differences that I had with the church dogma and doctrine. It became a matter of integrity, and I couldn't make that decision. So there it was, my direction. Finally, turned. Didn't expect it. So at age 42, I left the community and I was on my own again. Now, I'm going to back up a couple years here because service and ministry is what religious life is all about. Well, I came from a business background. I had no idea what I wanted to do. When they said, find your passion because you're going to wake up in the morning and not get financially compensated, what is it that you really feel drawn to do? So I was able to shadow some of the nuns in their work. And my passion was ignited when I followed a pastoral minister at a youth detention center for boys. We walked into the lockdown unit one day, which is where they housed the boys who were sexual predators. And I walk in and I see about 8 bunk beds and a handful of boys between 13 and 18 years old. And I'm standing at the door, totally out of my element. And I look to my right, and staring back at me from the upper bunk is this kid. And he looks me up and down and he says, so are you a nun? And I said, yes, I am. And he just shook his head and put his face back down in the pillow. And then he looked up again and he says, so you don't get no sex? And again, it's like, how do you respond to that? And it was the rawness in the question. And the most I said was, no, I don't. But in that moment, I saw the spark of God in him. And I knew that I was hooked. And I wanted to work with these kids, the more marginalized and probably what society would consider the throwaways. So I ended up going back to school, initially for social work, and then switched to education when I found out that the common denominator in all these kids was that they failed early on in school. And someone told me that ask any kid, if you gave them a choice to be labeled a dummy or be labeled a bully, each and every time they're going to choose the label bully. And I kept wondering, what if they didn't have to make that choice at all? So I ended up spending the last 15 years in a day treatment center for emotional and behavioral challenged youth. Definitely not an easy place to work. I used to joke that I went from an environment that spoke of Mother Superior to one that when you were called a mother, it was never followed by the word superior. So working with these kids, my spiritual journey took many turns, and I found that I had to face myself in ways that I never expected. And one of those was I couldn't be a savior to these kids. I had the delusional belief that if I could just save one child from a life of abuse or neglect or depression, that it'd all be worthwhile. And it took me reaching a state of burnout and working with a spiritual teacher for several years to really recognize the arrogance and destructiveness of holding that belief. And what I mean is that in it is the assumption that there's something wrong with these kids, that they're not perfect, that I can save them from this life that they're living. And as I recognized the whole spiritual concept that our outer world is a projection of our inner world, I really had to face myself and ask, what is it in me that I think needs to be fixed and saved? It's led me to the bigger question of how do we honor a child's spiritual path? How do we honor their life, knowing that their experiences are being guided by karma and soul's blueprints and life lessons to be learned, when what I perceive their life to be is one of suffering and pain? So what's my role in that, and how do I do that? And it's a question I think that many people at one time in their life are going to have to grapple with, especially parents. Parents of these awakened children are being presented with challenges. Their kids, awakened kids, are going to go through challenges. And that parent is being asked to be a witness to that. And like I said earlier, companion them through their tough times. One of the challenges is that these kids are shunned and bullied simply for being who they are. They try to express it or share their gifts, and they don't get a real positive reaction back. They feel a lot of isolation, which means they have a lot of deep loneliness that these kids have shared with me on some of these calls. Some kids that are just trying to get rid of the high energy that they feel are labeled ADHD and then pressured to conform through medication. And then those that really look at this world and see a void and the meaningless of it just suffer from severe depression. And especially the souls coming in that are new humans. And those are the ones that this is their first lifetime here on earth, and they don't bring in karma and density, and they don't have anything to ground themselves here in this earth. So the current leg of my spiritual journey, there is an end to this, I promise. Everybody's getting a little, these are tough, hard seats, aren't they? So in 2012, synchronicity, again, led me to find an energetic medicine practitioner who is still my spiritual teacher today. And then a friend of mine put me on to Michaela Sheldon's work in about 2015, and that's when, not too long after that, I started attending some of these. And in 2017, I went to my first Awaken Empowered Expo. And it was there that I saw a presentation from Mary Rodwell, who I mentioned earlier is that ET expert. She was giving a talk on children. She has a book out that you may be interested in if you have children or if you think yourself might be multidimensional and want some wisdom. It's called The New Human. Anyway, so she was presenting on her findings in this New Human. So I thought, wouldn't it be interesting? I'm open to hear a presentation about kids. But the fact that this had to do with extraterrestrials and abductees and hybridization programs, this was way beyond what I wanted to sit and listen to. I mean, I had barely gotten my mind around and believed that Michaela Sheldon is listening to the voice of Jeremiah in her closet or channeling Mary Magdalene or the Council of Light. This ET stuff was something else altogether. So, in a way, I think I had an easier time being open to like the concept of non-physical beings, like she channeled, than I did of physical ETs flying around in spaceships somewhere abducting people. But I listened to her talk and share the experiences of these children that were having memories and experiences of themselves as multidimensional. And we're talking about having come and volunteering here as part of the ascension process, that had memories of past lives on other planets, flying around in spaceships, going to night school on spaceships, learning about bilocation and new futuristic technologies. Well, I remember sitting in the audience and my head was exploding. I mean, there was like a battle of disbelief, but a true knowing. And I couldn't hold a thought in my head. And my body was buzzing. Now, I didn't have any of the knowledge back then. It was just all experiential. But what I recognize is it was probably the activation of a lot of key codes that have to do with my work today. Because things happened really fast after that. 3 months later, I was working with Ethan in the Lightworker program. A few months after that, we reactivated the Conscious Youth Remote Group. I was involved in the Weekend of Wizardry that year, and a year later, I'm the director of the Conscious Youth. So keep coming for those energy transfers, and your life too can evolve quickly. So during that time, I was also kind of given some channeled information that would say eventually that you're going to start remembering doing this work before as an Orion Council member, and worked with hybridization programs and crystal kids in the past. And that the Yael and Dolphin collectives would be assisting me with the children in this lifetime. And 2 out of 3 of those have happened, amazingly so. So if you've been following spiritual work for a while and have heard people talk, you're probably familiar with the labels that these new waves of children are given. And it's pretty generally agreed on that the indigos, the biggest influx of indigos came around the 70s. Crystal children started arriving about the mid-90s. Rainbows, maybe 2000, 2010. And there's plenty of places that if you want to look for characteristics or descriptions of any of these groups, or if you want to try to self-identify, you can just Google this and find all that. Today, I want to focus on kind of the higher concept of mission and purpose. Waves of children are born with a specific intention and mission. And when they arrive, the information in their auras present the same because they're connected with the same intention. So even though the influx of indigos happened in the 70s, they continue to arrive on this planet today. Only their auras look a little bit different. And this is because they arrive with different intentions based on the earth conditions or what they perceive as their service. The oversoul, that's a container that most humans don't have access to or connection with. And it's a connection that allows for cosmic information and communication to take place through. Well, indigos are very advanced in their oversoul container. They don't need to activate it because they can already connect to the information that's in it. And like I said, that's what gives them this immediate cosmic action. Thinking I was an indigo, I always wondered if the mission changes over time or as we age. So I asked Kaylaa to do some channeling on this for me. What she said was that indigos don't have a single mission. That the way it was explained to me is that the aura of an indigo is an indication of a similar vibrational structure. Their intention is similar in that they come to this planet to open a portal to move energy. Now, they all do this in different ways. So their mission is individual, but the intention is collective. And I'll catch up here. So the original indigos came to break apart the human norms and ideals that were creating a barrier to more advanced souls coming to ground to the earth. And they also came with new healing modalities, which in a way contributed to the fact that individuals' blocked energies that were connected to the collective could be healed. Now that's a mouthful, so I'm going to give an example. Let's say that many people hold the common belief that spiritual gifts aren't real, and that their doubt and their fear is reinforced by all this societal programming. Well, the resistance that they hold is not only a barrier to the collective and prevents other children from coming here, it also causes problems at an individual level. So the blocked energies manifest in our physical body. So let's say that many people are empathic and they resist their own gifts, and it causes blockages and pain in their physical or emotional body. The indigos come in very unique ways to offer healing in a way that removes that resistance for the collective good, and in the meantime, allow that individual to also heal and grow. How does indigos change or differ from crystal kids? Well, their difference is really structural. The oversouls are advanced in their oversoul container. The term crystal is used to refer to a human that operates out of their 12-strand DNA crystallized. Picture DNA as like a card catalog of information. We have both a crystal and a carbon DNA strand. The original human design, the human structure, was designed so that these two strands are integrated. That the cosmic DNA and the earthly DNA are combined. So when children come in crystallized, they're not affected by the earthly experiences and the density in a way that lowers their DNA potential. Their helix stays intact, and it allows them to maintain their access to the 12th dimensions throughout their lifetime. Now that's a blessing and a curse, because it's really tough to come from that higher perspective and adjust to the third dimensional density. Crystal children also operate outside of linear time. They operate at a very high speed of vibration, which means that time traveling, channeling, Akashic access is almost immediate. They aren't stuck to deciphering dimensions in order to access information. One of the advantages of having a crystallized DNA, one is simply the ability to exchange a high vibrational rate with other humans. And that's actually part of the intention of the crystal, is to simply come to Earth for the sake of raising its vibration. Now, they also make very good healers and teachers because of their Akashic access. They don't come in waves like the indigo and the rainbow. They are in many, many shapes and forms and reasons for being here. And they're also the children that are here in most number right now, mainly because the Earth is just in need of their energies. Rainbow children are they're similar to the indigos, but they show a range of color in their aura that is more hybrid in nature. And like the indigos, they come with a collective intention. Their reason for being here is they focus on offering a full spectrum of information in their aura, and that's meant to uplift the soul and put them in a new perspective. One of the focuses of this collective is to come and refigure the separate energy fields of humanity. Now, throughout time, humanity is focused in and operate out of the different realms, like the physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. We focus on one or the other over a period of time, and the rainbows actually come and heal this through their very presence. They live in the present moment in a way that most people on this planet are unable to do. So in a sense, they're facilitating what's called a 0 point, which is a present moment frequency, and allowing other humans to also move back to their 0 point. And that's the place where all these energy fields can work in concert. Finally, there's going to be a wave of children come with orange auras, and these are going to be the hybrids. The hybrids come with a whole new set of frequencies for the planet. A hybrid being is a genetically altered being that is designed to be more than one species. So their DNA is part human and part extraterrestrial. And my ears just started ringing. So this is, okay, whatever the message is, that's kind of fun. There are hybrids here on the planet now, just not in large numbers. And in one of my communications with this Yael collective, what they said is there's the highest probability that they'll start arriving in about 20 years. So they're coming. It's like how do I want to say? Well, let me just say this. If you're having a hard time getting your mind around this, you're not alone. I can see it's like part human, part ET. Part of their intention is dealing with just that. They're here to raise the frequency of humanity enough to help us evolve and embrace the fact that we have cosmic families and that we are star people. They're here to increase our awareness of other dimensions and also to help us accept the fact that there's other life forms in this universe. So they're acting kind of as the bridge. And when these children arrive, they're going to be teaching their parents based on their own experiences on other planets and their ways of being. And it's through that sharing of experience and knowledge that the rest of humanity is going to be allowed to shift. So as I look at the coming of these waves of children, it's almost like a perfect orchestration of the ascension process. The Indigos came to break up the stagnant energies and allow for the door to open to higher consciousness beings. The crystals arrive, raising the consciousness and the vibration of the planet, and in a way affecting the new Earth grid. And that new Earth grid opens us up to have intergalactic communication and influence. And then come the rainbow children, here to help us balance our energy fields, set that 0 point. And it's from that 0 point that allows us as multidimensional beings to actually communicate with other dimensions. And then finally, when the hybrids get here, they're going to prepare us to be ready for ET contact and disclosure. So I said earlier that we would actually get to the question of how do you best serve these awakened children? Yay, we got there. There's really two ways. One's a matter of being, and perhaps the other is a matter of doing. Just being and opening up our heart space to them is being in service to them. Sharing ourselves and letting them recognize who they are is the greatest thing that we can do for them. But if there is a matter of something that we need to do, first, stay playful and curious and keep that potential for possibility open. And then share your vibes. Now, what do I mean by that? It's easy to remember, but I came up with this acronym. V is for validate. What we can do is actually validate their experiences and also the feelings that are underneath their experiences. I is to show interest. And if we show that we're interested in various ways, we're going to keep them talking, and it's going to keep them open to their own abilities and not shut that down. Believe in. Now here is a little bit of a challenge because these kids are natural born lie detectors. They're going to tell when your words don't match what you're feeling inside, or if you have a hidden agenda. It's a very painful thing for them to go through, especially as they are hooking up with cliques of kids and adults that always have a hidden agenda. So if little Jimmy comes running to you in the morning and said he just spent night school on a spaceship, and you really can't believe that, don't try to tell him that you do. But we can believe in them. We can believe in their experiences and their own perceptions. And that will keep us authentic with our kids. E is for explore. Ask questions. Let them explore their own inner awareness. S is for speak, which is where we need to speak our own experiences as they come with different experiences to shed light and give it a spiritual perspective. Now, this little acronym is going to be used for anybody, any experience, any age. So your little 4-year-old wakes up in the middle of the night afraid, and won't go back into his own room. Or the 14-year-old who's depressed and won't come out of her room. Or your 94-year-old grandmother who tells you for the first time that she's got some ET dude sitting on her ceiling. So the takeaway from this is, no matter what we do, we can't do it wrong. Whatever we do, it's going to be just perfect. So in closing this time together, I want to give you yet another story. It's not an ending story, though. It's actually the prologue of my incarnation on this earth. When I was in my second year in the convent, I went on a 7-day silent retreat. Yes, another time for silence. And it was revealed to me during that experience. Now, at that time, I was really struggling emotionally and spiritually, that when you live this contemplative lifestyle, it leaves a lot of open space for issues to come to the surface. And I was having lots of issues come to the surface. So I was going through a time where I was really angry with God about my life. So much so that by the middle of this retreat, I came in to my direction session with this spiritual director, and I just said, we're canceling today, because there is no way I'm entering a prayer space today, and I don't care. Well, this wise woman said that God meets us where we're at. So she said, let God be in your anger. So I sat down, but I knew it was going to be a waste of time. So I took some calming breaths, and I closed my eyes, and just like I predicted, I saw nothing. No images, no colors, it wasn't even darkness. And at the time, my experiences have always been very vivid. I just saw like this white nothingness. So she starts and she says, is there anything you want to say to God? Well, that just totally refueled my fire. And I blurted out, well, heck yeah, I hate my life. This isn't fair. And I never even asked to be born. And it was in that final burst of anger that all of a sudden I recognized that I'm in the middle of this peace, and the anger was gone. And then it was surrounded by love, and then this bliss like I never experienced before. And that whiteness turned into this warm, all-encompassing white light. And I was in it and of it at the same time. I wasn't in physical form. And what transpired over the next 90 minutes was probably the first time I never denied an experience that I had. It was real, and it was real. So when I got out of that, it was in direct response to my saying, I didn't ask to be born. And I wanted to capture the awe and wonder of that, but I didn't want to do it just by regular journaling and get caught in my head. So I wrote a story, and I want to share that story with you. I wrote this in 1993, and it's called A Sparkle in God's Eye. In the beginning was the light. God was in the light. God was the light. And the love within this light was about to be shared. A sparkle appeared in God's eye as he contemplated yet another way to express his love. If one listened carefully, a conversation could be overheard in the light. It was the voice of God asking, would you like to be born? Will you go to earth and live out my presence? Will you allow me to express my love through you? The spirit to which he spoke felt overwhelmed with emotion. What a privilege, she thought. And without a moment's hesitation, she said yes. Well, God smiled and then said, but wait, before you give me your final answer, I have more to ask of you. You may have to bear some very, very difficult and painful years. The family into which I've chosen for you to live doesn't remember me as you know me now. Nor will you remember me for many years when you leave here. My heart aches knowing this, yet I send you out because I love you so. The spirit listened carefully as God continued. I'll be with you through it all, I promise. Just know that as you find your heart breaking due to troubled times, mine too will be breaking. But I trust and believe that you will return to my love. You're strong, you'll survive. But most importantly, you will remember. Knowing that this is what lies ahead for you, my love, do you still want to go? Well, hardly able to contain the joy, she blurted out, oh yes, how can I say no to you? My soul explodes with your love. It's an honor that you love and trust me so much. that you're willing to lose me in order to allow your love to grow inside of me. Yes, I will go. And with a touch of humor, she added, and you know I love a challenge. If somehow I can be used to live out your presence, I shall. Though my heart aches as you tell me I won't remember you. After a quiet, intimate moment passes between them, the Spirit took a deep breath and said, but if you, my God, ask me to go, I absolutely say yes. And as that final yes was uttered, the Spirit was hurtled from the light. Creation, conception, life as it is known on earth began. With unimaginable speed, the cells began to multiply, clinging to the uterine wall. A little girl was being created, forming from within her earthly mother. Those months in the womb seemed very long, yet God was with her, reassuring her along the way. His love surrounded her, and she knew it. However, the difficulty he'd warned her of had already begun. This spirit little fetus didn't know it then, but each time her shoulders felt tight and her stomach began to ache, her mother was going through a really tough and stressful and frightening time. How could she know that her mother was being abused? How could she know that her mother's anxiety was due to failed attempts at filing for a divorce during these 9 months? How could she know that her mother worried about bringing her into this world, wanting her baby, wanting to protect her, yet unable to protect herself? She couldn't. All she knew was that sometimes it hurt to be in this place. She cried out, God, I'm scared. Where are you? I hurt and I want to come back. I want to come home. Please make it stop hurting. God was with her as he promised, and in response to her pleas, he touched her mother in a very special way during those months. And when her mother's tension increased, his love and presence brought her some peace and allowed her to relax. Thus, so did the surroundings of the little fetus. At last, on Friday, October 16th, 1959, God's beautiful creation was ready to be born into the world. She emerged from the womb to find Jesus waiting for her. Jesus held her close for what was to be the last time in many years. No longer was she just a sparkle in God's eye, but a precious child in God's arms. There in the delivery room, time stood still. Their eyes locked in a loving embrace, each knowing each other for one final moment. Their hearts ached as they both knew she would forget this love that they now shared. Jesus assured her one last time that he'd always be watching over her and loving her. And as a sign of this promise, just seconds before the umbilical cord was about to be cut, her physical life-giving source, Jesus connected himself to her with a fine cord of light and love, which could never be severed. She would have a continuous source of life from that moment on. Then he kissed her goodbye, and with tears in his eyes, Jesus handed his precious child to her earthly mother, and she no longer remembered. So that's where I came from. That's where we all come from, this place of light and love and bliss. And the great news is that's where we're all going back to. I had no idea of these spiritual concepts when this took place. So over the next 25 years, things just continued to unfold, and I'd continue to go back to this story. I didn't know things like we had consciousness before birth, or that we truly do ask to be born, or that we choose our parents. And the whole question of mission and purpose is answered in this story, which is at the highest level, we're just here to live out love. That we do have experiences when we're in the womb that greatly affects who we are. And that this veil of forgetting is true upon birth for many of us. Now, also the idea that Source connects us to our heart space with this unbreakable connection and bond. What can't be conveyed in story form was actually the actual awakening of this experience. So that involved like a collapsing of timelines, is the best I can understand it. When I was in spirit form, I was totally conscious of not having a physical form, but totally conscious. When I was in utero, I was totally conscious. I could feel my shoulders ache and my stomach hurt. When I was born, this consciousness split into 3. I was fully embodied in this infant, looking at Jesus, being held, feeling his hands. And I was suddenly outside the bounds of that room, in the consciousness of my higher self, calm, neutral, watching this unfold in front of me. And between me and the infant was my 33-year-old self, standing next to Jesus, watching this unfold. So not only is that's amazing in itself, the awakening was happening in my 33-year-old self. There I was, as old as I was in real life, watching the promise of God be fulfilled to me, remembering what happened in spirit form, standing there in that moment, me, that one insignificant little soul. God loved me enough to promise and then fulfill that promise. It was indescribable. When my child self was handed to my mother, all of those timelines collapsed and all of those consciousnesses disappeared, and I was back sitting on the couch in this retreat center. And I brought back with me all those memories and those feelings and just sobbed for the next 2.5 hours with just awe and gratitude. What I'd like to leave us with here is just know with utter certainty that this isn't just my story. It's our shared story. And yes, the details are unique to me, but that promise is universal. And that connection and that bond of light and love is for all of us. So it's our shared story, and it's also our children's story. And whether that remembrance happens at the time of birth, which it does for many of our kids, or if it takes 33 years to unfold as it did for me, or if it doesn't happen till the final breath we take in this body, just know and trust that God's promise, that promise of remembering, is going to happen. And with that, thank you all for being here.
I found it very profound, very interesting. Even though sometimes it looked like I wasn't paying attention, I was listening to every word.
Never doubted that.
The fact that you were able to read that story at 33, that you actually saw the concept, I found that fascinating. And I really appreciate you that you shared the story. I was just thinking about my life as you were talking about your life. You were talking about shared lives. And the fact that my mother went through as much grief as your mother did, and you recognize that in the womb. And makes it understand that, we all are a product of our decisions and what happened with our parents. And I really appreciate you sharing that, because it made me reflect back on what I experienced that I didn't realize, until later years. I had also had that awakening like you did. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And I really appreciate you giving this. And I think that everybody has found it very informative. And this is going to be going on and on through YouTube, and you'll help a lot of people. So thank you.
It was worth all the months of, actually, I hate to say this, but this was actually kind of fun. I know those last 15, 20 minutes were pretty tough. Again, I can't thank you all enough for being here. Really appreciate that.